Welcome into the Inside Bassmaster Podcast, presented by Black Rifle Coffee Company. This is episode 126, and this is your Lay Lake Bassmaster Elite Series preview for the second week of May. The Bassmaster Elite Series took 1 week off after our South Carolina swing, and we're headed back into action here for the fifth stop of the season. We're officially going to be at the halfway point of the Elite Series season, but for the Bassmaster Elites and the Classic, we're already through 5 events, so we're already through halfway that way. But points race wise, we will be at the halfway point of the season at Lay Lake. And Kyle, what a great South Carolina swing we had. We got to showcase Lake Murray in the post spawn with a little bit of spawn in there still at the end. Obviously, that's how Drew Benton got the victory. But man, what a performance. What a lake. The way it showed out, 5 guys having a shot at the win legitimately within the last hour of the tournament. Fantastic there. And then we go over to Santee Cooper, and Luke Palmer finally gets it done. And talk about some momentum through the weekend. His Saturday and Sunday bags were huge, and he ends up with the 6th biggest victory, largest margin of victory, 6th all-time for Elite Series competition. So Drew Benton, Luke Palmer, congratulations to those 2 guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, you couldn't imagine, 2 better tournaments, with Murray being, somebody going what seemed like a little bit against the grain. Granted, you had 3 guys in the top 10 at least that were doing predominantly sight fishing, but before that event, it was all about herring spawn, fishing points, fishing top waters, flukes, things like that. And then for those guys to go in there and make that last for 4 days, and especially with Drew Benton having such a poor, it was a day 3, I guess.
Yep.
I mean, just crazy to have such a big comeback. It seems like we were having the discussion before the final day. It seems like you just about go ahead and pick whoever's in 10th to win if somebody's going to make a comeback, because it seems like the most unlikely circumstance for somebody to come back is typically the way it works out. But big time for Drew Benton there to have such a dominant performance on the final day and get the win. And then, yeah, like you said, Luke Palmer getting revenge on Santee Cooper. That was a special event for him. Like you said, same deal, charging late and, on Saturday and Sunday to notch his first Elite Series victory. So back-to-back thriller tournaments as far as I'm concerned. I got to see all the Luke Palmer action on the water firsthand. So that was thrilling to me. I'm sure for most people on the final day, it was not quite as thrilling because it was kind of a runaway train there for a little while, but still fun nonetheless. Two amazing events in South Carolina.
Yeah, and you got to see at Murray guys like Patrick Walters, Brandon Cobb, Jason Williamson use their herring and South Carolina knowledge to get a top 10. Then you go over to Santee Cooper, and you have guys like Drew Cook, Brandon Polinick, and Luke Palmer, who seemingly always make a top 10 there, do so very well. And then Mark Menendez, man, if not for 9 pounds on day 2, we might be crowning him a champion for his second Elite Series title. What a great event, or back-to-back events in South Carolina. Now we switch gears to Lay Lake, and our guest on the podcast today is a guy who's a Coosa River guy. Kyle, like I said, our guest on the podcast today, Scott Canterbury, he's a Coosa River guy. He might not be a Lay Lake local like some of the, it's normally if you're within 15 or 20 miles, 30 minutes of a lake, you're a local, but there's about 19 Elite Series pros in between Scott Canterbury and Lay Lake that we could have picked any one of them. But Scott, Coosa River time, Lay Lake, stop number 5. What are your thoughts about how this Elite Series event could go down next week or this week?
I think it's going to be a great event. We've just left 2 huge fish factories, and the fishing was unbelievable. The big fish that were brought in was crazy. I don't think we're going to see that at Lay Lake, but we're going to have a really, really good tournament. Maybe something like Neely Henry was a couple of years ago, a really good event. And it's going to be a little tighter at the top. I think everybody's going to catch fish, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We've had a weird spring, a lot of cooler weather than normal for this time of year. So it'll be interesting to see how the fish are actually set up right now.
Scott, I take it you're in the warehouse of Mark's Outdoors right now. Is that correct?
I am. It's been crazy. They had a couple of 100 people waiting in line this morning. They have a big event. Got a lot of pros in town. Matty Wong's here, Clint Davis. We got a lot of guys already here and a bunch more coming all day.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. Obviously I just moved to this area just 2.5 years ago or so. It is a special area for bass fishing, maybe the most special in the entire country. Just talk about that for a second, if you could. Just the excitement from the people in this area, and bringing the Elite Series to the Coosa River again after a couple,
Yeah,
or I
man.
guess, year hiatus.
It's definitely a special place for bass fishing. I mean, I can just turn and look right out. It's just a special place for bass fishing. The people that are out here right now. We're in the hub central here in the southeast, and it's just it's really awesome. Jacob Walker's here. He's going to be a marshal next week, but it's going to be it's special to be here. I mean, fishing is what people do here in Alabama. I mean, it's been unbelievable. The tournaments that they have around here is I mean, we have tournaments. They have tournaments every night. I mean, the Lake, Logan Martin, all over up and down the Coosa. It's 5 nights a week, and then on the weekends there are probably 5 or 10 tournaments going on each weekend. So it's special to grow up here, but also the diversity that you get to see here. I mean, we got Tennessee River an hour north, and you got Smith Lake and Lake Martin. You get to fish those Highland Reservoir type lakes and learn a little bit about them too.
One thing about Lake, whether you could be from Kansas or Nebraska or Montana, and if someone says Beeswax Creek, you don't know necessarily how to get there, but you know that that's Lake because of the Bassmaster Classics we've had. And it's interesting that we've got so much Bassmaster history at Lake, but no Elite Series history, and none really this time of the year. We had an Open in 2020 in the fall, and we've had all our classics in February. What are we going to expect to see in May? I mean, will we see some bass spawning still? Will we see some shad spawn? Will current be a factor? Can you win it up lake? Can you win it down lake? It seems like it's all over.
You could definitely win it up or down the lake. I mean, you could, Will Davis is one of the best around here at fishing that river, and he's really good at it, knows it better than anybody. I grew up fishing up there. I mean, that's where I learned how to fish, is at Lake up in the tail race area. And I know it really well as well. But, we're going to have a shad spawn, I'm sure, because the delayed spring that we've had this year. I mean, this is the time of year that they should be spawning. It may be getting kicked off really good as well. I haven't even been fishing this week. It's one of the rare weeks that I've been at home and didn't go fishing at all. But, I expect it to be really good. There's going to be a good shallow bite. May is the month. It's sort of a weird deal. If I would have picked 10 times for a tournament to be here, this would have been the 10th. This would have been the very last. If we would have been here a month ago, it would have been unbelievable. If we would have been here 2 months ago, it would have been super, super great. All the spots are through spawning. They're going to be postponed for sure, postponed, and it's going to be an in-between stage. Like, they're not in their spawning places, but they're not in the deep brush yet either. Like, that's usually a June, second week of June, maybe even third week of June. They really get in that brush, and the weights you'll see it being tough for, throughout middle of May into June. You'll see the weights being a little low, and then all of a sudden you'll have 2 or 3 weeks in a row where there'll be those 18, 20-pound bags where those fish got in the brush out deep. And there's a ton of brush in the lake now, and it's from every depth. So I expect that offshore brush to be a player. There's just not as many fish in it as there will be in another month. There still should be a few fish up Garden Fry, shallow, but there's going to be a lot of fish that live shallow at Lake. So, I mean, a man can really just pick the way he wants to fish and do well in this tournament, I think.
We always talk about conditions when it comes to, spawning type tournaments, needing warm weather, warm nights, things like that. With it being this time of the year, obviously it's going to vary, of course, what pattern you're trying to run, but what are like the ideal conditions? Like for you, at least, like what are the conditions that we need this week for it to be better than, maybe to move from 10th on your list to like 5th or 6th or somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, I was really hoping that we were going to have a early summer. I was hoping that we'd see those 80, 85, 90 degree days for a couple of weeks, get some fish in that brush, get some fish, tucked in the cover where something that I would have an advantage at. And that's what I was looking forward to. I mean, we got a high today of like 63 here. It's crazy. But starting tomorrow, we're going to be up around 80, and we're going to be 80. It just hadn't happened long enough. I mean, it's been in the 40s the last 3 or 4 nights. I know the water's probably pretty cool, but you're definitely we're going to see that shad spawn activity. That's going to be a key player. And then figuring out what to do after, 8 o'clock in the morning. It just doesn't last longer on the Coosa. And if you can figure out how to put something with that, if you can catch a couple in the morning, figure out how to put something with it on up in the day, whether it's those brush piles, or some guys can be hard headed and stay in the grass all day. Though some of those fish don't leave. It's just hard to catch them. And I mean, it'll be a really interesting tournament to see how it goes down. I don't know if somebody, and it's always interesting. We got the best in the world fishing the elites, and I mean, these guys can figure it out. And it's always interesting to see that somebody will go to an area and figure out and stay in an area and catch them. Like me, I'll be jumping around. I mean, I'm going to try to fish it just like I would, hopefully, 4 one-day tournaments is what I'm hoping for. Definitely 2 of them, but hopefully 4 of them. And, I fished there my whole life, and I know the lake really well. So I'm looking forward to it. Just don't want to get too, I've been doing it long enough that I shouldn't let it get to me just being a home lake deal.
That's what I was going to say. It was the hardest thing probably for a local, and I'm not at y'all's caliber, but whenever I used to have college events at Lake Norman, which was my home lake, I would practice it like I'd never been there. I think the time of the year, it's early March, late February, maybe marinas will be a deal. So let me circle a couple marinas and figure it out and kind of start as a blank slate. For you looking at lay, I feel like you could separate the lake into 3 places. You could go from the water plant to the dam. You could go from Bully Creek to Paradise Point. You could go from the Narrows down to Paint Creek, and it's 3 different lakes. How do you feel like you're going to invest your 3 days of practice so that you're not running around and stretching yourself too far from Paint to the dam, but that you've at least known what's going on?
Yeah. That's the way I'm thinking about doing it, exactly like you're talking about. I want to fish in the river for sure, because that's, there's so many fish in the river, and the spotted bass are going to bite pretty much no matter what the conditions are. Current's a big factor to that. And, that could be not necessarily a safe, but could be a safer way to fish to get you into the, into the cut. But I also want to try to win the tournament, but I'm not going to, I've told myself, and I probably won't do it, but I've told myself I wasn't going to practice from daylight to dark, but I probably will. But I think that I would be better off if I just went and practiced a couple of half a days and then went fishing. Really and truly, I think that'd be my best bet. And, I'll probably put in a couple of long days and then take it easy the 3rd day and sort of get me a game plan together. And like I said, I want to fish to win. I try to fish every tournament to win, but this is one that you definitely want to try to be, put yourself in the position to do that anyhow.
Let's talk about weights or weight predictions. I think that a lot of people, listen to this podcast will play fantasy fishing, things of that nature. Kind of curious to know like what the weights will be. Maybe to make the cut and then to make the top 10, and even, what your guess for winning weights would be.
Yeah, I think that, 11 or 12 pounds a day is going to make the cut. I just think that that's going to be a decent weight, and I'm pretty sure that it will be. Probably 14 a day or something to make the top 10, and 16 or something like that a day to win. The thing that somebody will do is there'll be a 20-pound bag. Somebody will catch 20 pounds, and then you got to try to back it up 2 or 3 days in a row. If you caught 20 and 17, it's going to make it, your weights, you may beat that 16. You may be at 17 pounds a day, but anything around that 16-pound mark is going to put you in the hunt to win the tournament.
Now, on that line of the winning weight and fantasy fishing, I wish I could put a whole team of Coosa guys together, and I could, but we know very well when you go to the Carolinas and you have Lake Murray, you have 13 guys from North Carolina and South Carolina combined. Half of them are going to miss the cut, and then half will make it, and then there'll be a few that make the top 10. I feel the same way. We got Strassner, Poche, Heron, Hamner, Gaston, Davis, another Davis, Canterbury. We've got so many Coosa River guys, and then I didn't even put Kennedy in there. Logan, I forgot. I think I said Logan, but you've got so many Alabama guys, a Welcher in there. How do you feel like some of these guys are going to use their local knowledge? Is it more of a higher percentage can make the cut on the Coosa River based on y'all's instincts and knowing what to do, or do you think you could get caught up and mess up?
I don't think so. I don't think it'll be a higher percentage. It's bass fishing. These guys are going to figure it out. Guys that are on a roll are going to catch them. They're going to figure it out and put it together. Definitely a little bit different fishing rivers than reservoirs. And the river guys are going to do good. Welcher, he's always putting stuff together. But there's a lot of Alabama guys that I wouldn't. I mean, you can ask them all. I don't really know, but I wouldn't consider all of them like Coosa River guys or Lay Lake guys. I mean, I fished tournaments there my whole life. This is where I grew up, and I've never seen half of those guys fishing there. Heron used to fish Lay Lake a ton. Probably one of the biggest bags, maybe the biggest bag I've ever seen at Lay Lake. Matt Heron weighed in, but he hasn't fished there as much in the last 10 years, but he knows the lake as well as anybody. You got Clint Davis, who fishes it a lot. He's 30 minutes from his house. I'm an hour and 10 minutes, but you got Will Davis, who fishes it probably more than anybody has the last 3 or 4 years, any of us. I mean, and when I'm at home, I fish tournaments there with him. I mean, I fish against him, and he's taken my money over the past few years. Clint Davis, you got David Gaston. David Gaston lives 15 or 20 minutes from Cedar Creek. So he probably fished it as much as Will has the last couple of years. My fishing experience on the lake has not, I mean, I fish as much as anybody when I'm at home. So I still get to fish it a lot, but I haven't fished it as much in the past, 10 years as I used to. I mean, we used to fish every weekend there. Every Saturday, it seemed like we had a tournament there. Mark's Outdoors used to put on a tournament with 500 boats. Every year had 500 boats in one tournament. So the lake will hold it. It's just a matter of people can find enough area that, that's not being too crowded by other anglers.
Scott, I was going to ask you about this. We've asked this to other guys we've had on the podcast and things of that nature. When you're talking about a local and like a favorite, more or less, how do you go about navigating during practice? Like, is there things, you won't even touch during practice just for the, the sake of, you don't want people seeing you? Like, how do you go about navigating that? Or you just kind of just check what you want to check?
My motor's not running right now, so I'll be in a different boat. So, I mean, it won't really matter. No, I'm
sneaky.
I'm just kidding. I fished up in tournament. I fished up in every tournament all year long that I don't touch in practice. On a place that I've never even been, I'll fish stuff that looks good to me. I'll go hit it if it looks good to me. So I'm not going to fish everything in practice. No, I'm going to fish, I'll fish if I divide it into areas of a lake, I may fish the bottom third of the lake. And if that's where I ended up wanting to go fish, I can't cover it all in one day. So I'll have plenty to fish no matter what. And if somebody sees me, they just see me. I'm not too worried about it.
The one big aspect at the Coosa River is these places, acreage wise, like we just got off Santee Cooper, 170,000 acres. And then you've got Lake Murray, 50,000 acres. Lay Lake's like 12 to 15,000 acres, but it spans a lot of miles. It's long. Can you tell us about the current aspect of how long it takes when they turn on that water to get to Beeswax, to get to Paint Creek? And then also, what's a good number? If I'm looking at a chart and I'm like, are they actually moving a lot of water? What would that number be to you that you're like, that's an average number?
I look at, I mean, you put the smart app in your phone for the for the Coosa River Lakes, and it's Alabama Power. But, Logan Martin Dam is at the upper end of the Lay Lake. And when they turn the current on there, it takes a long time to get to know it. If you're over halfway down the lake, you won't see current at all. You might notice that your water may be coming up or something. You may see it backing into a pocket around some grass or something, backing up a little bit. But when they turn the water on the lower end, where they have 5 turbines, they have 3 at Logan Martin Dam. So they have 3 turbines that generate water. If they're running one, I can't remember the cubic foot per second, but it's 12,000 cubic feet per second. And then they run 2, it'll be 24, and then 3, 38,000 cubic feet per second. And that's all they have at Logan Martin Dam. Where the turbines at Lay Dam are a little smaller. They have 5 of them. So you have to compare it. If they're only running 1 out of the lower end, that's not even moving much water. If they're running 2 out of the lower end, that's like running 1 out of the upper end. So when they turn the water on at the lower end is when you start seeing current if you are fishing that lower end of the lake. And that's when it, will set fish up on rock points or transitions or a current break that you're fishing on that lower end of the lake, even from mid-lake down, really. But when they're running water upriver, the bad situation that I've noticed over the years is when they're pulling a lot of water out of Lay and they're not running any out of the upper end. If you're upriver, the water's dropping and there's not much current, and you can tell that they're pulling water because it's leaving you and the water's dropping. But that's when it's really hard to catch fish, is when you're up there and they're pulling water on the lower end and they're not running any in the upper end. If they're running it at both ends, it's running straight through and it's creating a lot more current.
Yeah, and I feel like where maybe the lake opens up at the bottom and gets a little wider than it does up in the river, it then necks down in the narrows. And so that little bit of current can seem like a whole lot more current. Like it's a lot swifter because it narrows.
That's an area that really has a lot more effect with current, is the narrows. And, you know, any of those pinch points like that always do. And those spots love it. I mean, it attracts, it's just a place for fish to set up and ambush bait.
Well, Scott, I'm super excited to have the Elite Series come into Lay Lake. I love these places that, I know a lot about Lay just from bass history, but not Elite Series competition. So I'm excited to see that. I know it's big for the communities. All these pros come into Mark's Outdoors and places like that. It's cool to see communities.
We got Bucks Island tomorrow, got B.A.S.S going on. There's people doing everything around the whole community just for the tournament. So, I mean, it's pretty special to be here, to be at a home lake, but I mean, it's just crazy to see the community, how many people are actually involved with it and involved with fishing. And they all support, you know, Bassmaster. They all supporting the tournament. They all support these local shops and everything. And it's pretty special.
Well, we hope, Kyle and I both wish you well, that you get to fish 4 one-day tournaments next week, and it'll be a good week for Scott Canterbury.
We're looking forward to it. Either way, we're going to have fun, and we're going to leave it all out there. And if it's meant to be, we'll be fishing 4 days. If not, we'll be hanging out at the booth with y'all maybe.
Awesome. Well, Scott Canterbury, appreciate you joining us, giving us a little preview about Lay Lake, and we'll let you get to Mark's Outdoors and all your autographs and seminars that I know that you're going to be doing. So appreciate you, man, taking the time.
We'll be looking forward to seeing y'all this week. I appreciate it. Looking forward to the tournament, guys.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Scott Canterbury, our guest today on the podcast. Kyle, a great guest that you could tell how much knowledge he has of Lay Lake, because his mind is all over the place. Like, he knows, and that's a good and a bad thing, that I've caught 20 pounds down at the bottom of the lake. I've caught 20 pounds near takeoff. I've caught 20 up the river. That can really help you out when you're in a bind. But like he said, there are guys who are going to be sitting in the same pocket all day long that catch up the same weight as somebody who ran around and hit 150 spots. So there's a balance there, and we'll see how Scott handles that balance.
Yeah, no question. We haven't even really got into it yet, but I've been so excited for this tournament personally, just because it's the lake that I fished the most since I moved to Birmingham, and I can't wait to see, guys like Scott and Wes and Matt Herron and Will Davis and Clint Davis and Stracer and all these guys attack the lake, because I've seen every single one of those guys out there fun fishing at some point in time, and it'll be interesting to see, like, in a tournament aspect when it's all on the line, like, see how all these guys attack the lake. And then you have the aspect of it that I think we've talked a lot about the local advantage and the amount of locals that are in the tournament. Like you mentioned, just like it was in South Carolina, there will be a scenario where there's probably more than half the guys in the top 10 are guys that have probably never seen the lake, just based on the the odds of it and the way it'll probably work out. So there's going to be some of these guys that it just fits stylistically, and it seems like there's a handful of those guys in my mind that should fish well here, despite probably not fishing here much. And it'll be interesting to see. And I'm really looking forward to getting into fantasy fishing, because this one probably has me more nervous than any tournament the rest of the year, because I'm like, which ones do you go with? You could go with an all Alabama lineup if you wanted to and justify it, but dang well that there's going to be guys that do better probably than all the Alabama guys. So it is tricky, and just from a fishing standpoint, it's a tournament I'm looking forward to a ton.
Yeah, and that's what's, where some of these Coosa River guys are and who they're pitted in the same buckets with will determine, looking at the lineups, you could pick 5 great picks that have 0 Coosa River guys. But then in the back of your head, you're like, oh, I'm screwed. If I don't pick a local guy, somebody's going to catch one of them, but then betting on which of the 9 that have experience here is going to catch them, that's the hard thing to predict. So, Kyle, if you're ready, why don't we just jump in and do a little bit of fantasy fishing? But actually, before we do, I'm glad that Scott talked about that a little bit with the turbine situation, because and I'm kind of obsessed with it. Talking to Wes Logan in the last episode of the podcast for Pattern of the Month, I brought it up, but then also Scott Canterbury, the water movement aspect. There are all these lakes that we go to. A lot of them are single lakes, or they're maybe a part of a river chain, but that's not a daily occurrence of moving water. The dams are used to fluctuate water so that they don't flood, or so places don't get overwhelmed with water or underwhelmed with water. They just keep it balanced. But I feel like the Coosa River, the Tennessee River, places in Alabama, these guys know how to fish current so well because these fish are trained by current. I mean, in the summertime when they move the water on the Tennessee River, it's time to eat. The buffet, you line up on a ledge and everybody slides from the bank out to the main river. You see that happen. And then I know that the power of, it's only 12,000 acres. You could have 27 Elite Series anglers show up in 500 acres of it at the top of the lake near the dam, or down the lake, like he said, near the other dam. The power of water movement. And so I'm really interested to see that. How much they send from Logan Martin daily to Lay, and how much they move from Lay down to Mitchell and where it hits the Alabama River, down past there. So I really would love for you to be out there on the water covering it and getting a good look at, the lake, the river, and to see that balance. And the more people Kyle Jessie can see on the water, you'll know, hey, I saw a whole lot of guys in the middle of the lake that ended up making the cut. Or I saw a whole lot of contingent. There was more that made it up the cut up the river than missed it,
Sure, yeah, no question. I'm looking forward to seeing that myself. I've got ironically, when Jacob Walker walked past on at Mark's Outdoors, he is my boat driver. So I'm gonna have probably about as good as it gets as far as a wealth of knowledge on Lay Lake. Has almost finished second there at the Open a couple years ago. Has missed the Elite Series by like less than 5 points 2 years in a row. I mean, is just an absolute stick. And then on Lay Lake, knows about all there is to know about it. I wouldn't say this to Scott Canterbury, but I'd say in the last 5 years, he's probably fished the lake more than any of the pros in the field, just because of how much he fishes the lake. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to getting his take on it. It's possible we might get a little insight from the water from him and be able to help out, because he will certainly have some good knowledge on Lay Lake.
No doubt. Let's go ahead and jump into fantasy fishing as well. I'm going to give us a first breakdown of each bucket and how many of these Coosa River guys are occupying the bucket. So in bucket A, we've got Canterbury, Clint Davis, David Gaston. And if you're looking and you wonder why Clint Davis might be there, we have two Davises. So Will and Clint were switched. So Clint's not in bucket A for any other reason other than a clerical error, not because of AOY or because we thought he's going to catch him so good we put him in bucket A. So we've got Canterbury, Davis, Gaston. If you want to put Steve Kennedy and Kyle Welcher in there, that's 5 guys from the river type places in Alabama that are there. Bucket B, when you scroll down the list, there's not a single Coosa River guy in bucket B. So you can kind of have, honestly, that makes bucket B a lot easier for me, that I don't even have a choice between them. I could just pick another dude. That's great. Bucket C, we get down there and you've got Justin Hamner, who's maybe more of the Alabama River with the Northport aspect of it, but just from that same region still. Then you have Swindle from Gunnersville. You have Joseph Webster from Western Alabama towards the Smith Lake region. Then you go to bucket D. You've got Atkins, who is a Pickwick, Tennessee River guy, but has a victory in the Bassmaster Opens on Logan Martin. I got to cover him fishing that offshore brush in the middle of the summer or the fall, doing that. In bucket D, along with him, you've got a Bassmaster Classic champion from the Coosa River, David Fritz, long time ago, different time of the year, but just wanted to mention that. And Wes Logan in bucket D and Josh Strassner in bucket D. So we've got 2 bona fide Coosa River studs in bucket D. And then bucket E, like we said, that clerical error, Will Davis should be in bucket A, but he's in bucket E right now. So we have Davis, Heron, Keith Poche. those are the three guys from that region, which I'd say Keith Poche is more of a Coosa River guy than people would expect based on the places he's lived. And I remember covering him, I believe, and he did well at the 2020 fall event for Lay Lake, and he did it
in December. Yeah,
he did it in a different part of the lake than, in that. Speaking of that, that's the most tangible recent event, and if I remember correctly, Keith Carson won that event, made the classic. It was one of the last events of the season to qualify for the Elite Series. You had Jacob Walker up the river. You had a couple other guys after day one or so, I think, up the river that were in contention. Then you had, I think Poche was down lake. Carson was down, not down lake, but like mid lake, I think, fishing grass. So it wasn't really dominated by the dams and the current, but I will say that that's a time of the year that you wouldn't expect it to be. It's not the hot months, a lot less energy is being used, a lot less water being moved. So we'll see now in May how that factors. But if there's anything you remember about 2020 before we move to fantasy, feel free to drop it, because that is, I don't want to get it confused with the Neely Open or any of the other events we've had around there.
Yeah, no, one of the things I do remember about that event, I remember a lot because it's one of the first events I worked since moving here, which is part of the reason I fell in love with that lake, just because I love the way it sets up. It doesn't always fish as good as it seems like it should, but the one thing I will say in that event I remember vividly is the top 10 was flooded with locals. And what I mean by that is not like local pros, like locals, guys that fish local events. So that's one of those things that I'm keeping in the back of my mind. Like, you hate to just go all locals, but at the same point, like in events where, locals have fished there, whether it be local pros or like, local weekend, more or less guys, they've had success there. And I think there's something to be said for that. But no, like you said, it was very spread out. Guys were doing different things. Definitely, even what Keith Carson was doing was completely off the wall. I remember I was in the boat with Wes Logan. We were doing Skype hits for the live show that you guys were producing. And I even told him, he and I were just sitting there, and I said, dude, if this was me, I'd be looking at the stuff he's fishing and think this is all dead water. Like, this is all water that nobody would fish. And he ends up winning the tournament off of it. So I think that there's a bite to be had pretty much from one end of the lake to the other. And to me, that's what makes it exciting. I mean, like you said, the acreage might not be quite what it is of some of the other Elite Series tournaments, but I think for the most part, there's going to be a lot of guys spread out, because, if you're wanting to do the shallow deal, fishing grass, fishing, off the main river, there's plenty of places on the lake to do that. Pretty much from one end of the river, like main river, to basically the bottom, all has fishable, good stuff to fish. If I had to guess, I would guess it'll be spread out more than what the acreage would say, but there will certainly be places, like you said, the guys maybe fishing up the river that will have other guys to contend with. So a lot of things at play. I think that we will certainly see a lot of different factors, a lot of different techniques, baits. And to me, that's what makes it interesting. Like Scott said, it might not be the best time of the year weight-wise to go there, but I think that the time of the year is going to present a lot of opportunities for guys to do, different things altogether.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I feel like one of the best offshore, like mid-depth places is just right out in front of beeswax, which is a great recipe for releasing fish and repopulating the mid portion of the lake. So we'll see how that goes. But let's jump into fantasy fishing. Buckets A through E for Rapala. Honestly, I have blown chunks this year. 58.9%. I'm doing terrible. I mean, if you want Ronnie Moore to tell you who's going to be in the top 20 or the bottom 20, I got you. But if you want me to avoid a bomb, no shot. So sorry to one of these five guys or two of these five guys. You're probably going to bomb because I picked you. It's just been so hard lately I could pick them for the right reasons, and they just, you know how it is. I said this is the hardest sport to do for fantasy, because a guy that it's a cranking tournament and you pick a best cranker in the world and he just doesn't get on a cranking bite that week. And then he just doesn't do well. So who knows? But I'll go first. I always make you go first. I'll go first. I've got, for my 5 buckets, I've got John Cox in bucket A. He's fishing his 97th tournament in as many weeks. And so let's just say there's nobody who's fished more than John Cox. He fished 2 Elite Series events in the South Carolina, heads over to Missouri to fish another tour event. He's going to be back at Lay Lake fishing here this week. And I think he's not going to be late. He's going to be arriving. He's going to have practice. The last time we fished on the Coosa River, he had 0 practice, and it showed by his like 98th place finish. So John Cox, month of May, swim jig, possible sight fish, maybe some grass, frogging, things like that, or walk in topwater. I like John Cox for the mid-lake down bite. I don't think that he's necessarily going to be a river guy, and so I like that aspect of him. It was hard not to maybe pick a Coosa guy in that bucket, but you got quite a few that are high percentage picks. But man, David Gasson's a sneaky one if you really want to go off percentages. Bucket B, not a single Coosa guy in this bucket, and I'm going with Bill Lowen. I think that he's having a better season. This kind of sets up for his style. Let's just say it's a little stingier, but you're maximizing a shallow bite for the fish going in between. Even if he wants to go manage some current, we saw him manage current just fine at Pickwick. I feel like he's going to be one that can get in it, get out of it, get skinny with it, all of that stuff kind of goes in Bill Lowen's category there for me. This one's a little different, but I looked down bucket C, and like we mentioned, there's a couple Alabama guys, but there's really only you can maybe say Justin Hamner, Coosa River guy, but he's more of an Alabama River guy, but it's all very similar. But otherwise, there's not really many locals in this bucket. And I'm kind of going to go for the guy who finds something off the wall or off the bank. Maybe somebody does find some brush or some stump flats or some things forward-facing sonar-wise. And I'm going with Austin Felix. I feel like when it does get to be a little bit of a tough grinder, that Felix could be a good one, especially with his electronics, especially with some spotted bass around, maybe drop shot, shaky head, Nico rig, something like that. I feel like Austin Felix could be one to find something off the bank. Bucket D, I have switched this once or twice, and I've gone back and forth between Caleb Kufal and Josh Strassner. Caleb Kufal, Josh Strassner, back and forth. I feel like Caleb Kufal could move to Alabama, and based on his stature, he's a little guy, and his style of fishing, he would fit in really well in the Coosa River because there's a lot of little guys that fish like him on that system. So Caleb Kufal was my pick. I went to Josh Strassner. I've gone back to Kufal. Now I have settled in on Josh Strassner. I feel like I'm going to go with him. Wes Logan, we had him on the podcast last episode. I was tempted to do that, but 30%, 28.8% for him. That's overwhelmingly more than Josh Strassner. It's well more than Caleb Kufal. Taku's 13%. I feel like I can't go wrong between Kufal and Strassner. And so I'm just going to pick Strassner, going to roll with that there. He had a good event at Santee Cooper, some good mojo coming in. Now he's going to be fishing close to home. We get to bucket E, and I was the one who called you out, off camera about this and was like, wait, what the heck is Will Davis doing in bucket E? He is having a great year. I almost had to go look up his Murray and Santee finishes and was like, did he finish last? Like, how did he drop down low? A little bit of a clerical error having 2 Davises and 2 Huffs. We've seen the same thing with Mike and Cody Huff. They just get allocated to the wrong bucket. Not out of our control. It's out of our control. We don't control that. Our third-party person does. So Will Davis being in bucket E, having a great season, being a big-time local, is at 46%. And right there, I was like, if I'm going to pick one of the Coosa guys, it's going to be Will Davis. But that's a huge percentage. I'm going to say, actually, you know what? I'm going to say screw it. I'm going to pick Will Davis. Normally I don't like to pick high percentage guys in high buckets because guys have done so well, but it's kind of an olive branch gift, I'll say. Will Davis being in bucket E, with how he's fishing this year, with how many locals are not in that bucket, I'm gonna make an executive decision on the Bassmaster podcast, and I'm going to pick Will Davis Jr. 45.8%, but I'm going to go with him. Matt Herron's also in that bucket. And my original pick that I just switched off of, he's probably going to turn it around this week because I was planning to pick him and didn't. But David Mullins, I feel like that in between. I feel like maybe if we find something off the bank, Mullins might turn it around this week with that. I have no idea what Keith Poche is going to do. If he's going to go way back in a creek that we can't even cover him, or if he's going to go up towards the dams or just fish the main river. I have no idea what his style is going to be. He could do it all here, so I'm kind of avoiding that because I'm unsure. And I have to check to see if he's even fishing this event. If being completely honest, I have no idea if there's a conflict. So yeah, you know what? I'll make that executive decision, Kyle. I'll switch from David Mullins to Will Davis at the last second on the Bassmaster podcast. Not switching it anymore. Lock it in. John Cox, Bill Lowen, Austin Felix, Josh Strassner, Will Davis. Done. Lock it in.
Yeah, I'm with you on Will Davis. I got to be transparent here too. I made all my picks right before we started the podcast. So if you do read the fantasy fishing columns, like the picks, and you read mine and it's different than what I say on here, it's because I've had a change of heart. Whatever's on there is probably going to be my final picks. But the picks I got, I like a lot. Okay, so Bucket A to me is really tricky because obviously you could go a lot of different directions with guys that are locals, guys that have fished here a lot. If David Gaston was in any other bucket other than A, I would probably go with him, no doubt. And it's possible that I would still do it. I know, that's who I picked for Rookie of the Year. He's had a fantastic year, has made the cut in every single event to this point. I think that David Gaston, somebody that's going to get overlooked and is going to do really well. So if I switch to David Gaston, don't be surprised. But just to go against the grain a tad, even though his percentage is higher, so I don't know if that really makes sense. I'm actually going to go with Kyle Welcher in Bucket A. So Kyle Welcher's style, I don't think it has nothing to do with being a local whatsoever. I don't think he's a local, has probably not fished Lay Lake a ton, if I had to guess. I mean, he's definitely fished it, I'm sure, but not a ton. But Kyle Welcher, the style that he likes to fish, the shallow grinders, swimming a jig, frogging, flipping, he's going to be one of those guys I could see that, like Canterbury mentioned, that will stay up there all day and, will capitalize on an early morning bite and then still stay up there potentially and catch him one or two big ones late in the day. Just a guy that I think stylistically matches so well with Lay Lake. So as of right now, I got Kyle Welcher in Bucket A. Bucket B, we actually do agree on Bucket B. I got Bill Lowen as well. I think you talk about Bill Lowen, any tournament where it's like basically immediate post spawn, like end of April to like early June, but he can still fish shallow. Like he's dynamite. He's literally so good at that time of the year, just fishing shallow, grinder style. I mean, you think of them all off the top of your head. I mean, he's had a lot of success in those style of events. So going Bill Lowen in Bucket B. Bucket C, I've been giving this one some thought. So there's also, plenty of guys in Bucket C that I could see doing well. Obviously, I think Swindle will have a good event. I think it sets his, it's his style of fishing for sure, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to lost of words. But
he did well at Neely Henry. He really did well.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
For sure. Obviously has a lot of experience there. I think that he could do extremely well. But at the higher percentage, I'm going to go away a little bit. And in Bucket C, I'm going Jason Christie. So you think back to the Neely Henry tournament, obviously was in the top 10, had a super, super good event there. If you look back, he fished that 2020 Open and didn't do well at all. But I think it was for reasons that had nothing to do with his actual fishing ability. That's the only thing I'll leave that at. I don't want to speculate too much as to what happened, but I had heard some reports during practice that he was catching like 20-pound bags during practice, and I think decided maybe not to during the tournament. But Jason Christie, if you look at Lay Lake and these lakes around here on the Coosa River, they set up so similar in ways to like Lake Ucha, Kerr Lake, a lot of those East Oklahoma lakes, shallow grass. I think just from having fished both of them, because I fished in East Oklahoma. Yeah, absolutely. They fish so similar. And I think that Jason Christie feels at home on the Coosa River in a way because it sets up so similar to those, places that he used to fish. And the fact that he's in Bucket C and he's not the highest pick angler. I think maybe not even the second highest, or maybe he's the second. Pretty remarkable. So I'm going Jason Christie in bucket C. Bucket D, I am going chalk again, I guess that's what you want to call it. I'm going Wes Logan in bucket D. So in complete transparency, I had him at Santee Cooper, and I did switch to Brandon Polinick right before the event started, which ended up being a good move because Polinick ended up in the top 10. But I think even an unsuccessful event at Lay Lake for Wes Logan would still be inside the top 50. I think that it sets up so well for his style. He'll be able to just, once again, I'm knocking on wood here because I don't want to jinx him, but he should just be able to show up and fish this tournament the way he wants to fish and be able to have a solid event. If he finds those magic stretches, those magic deals, I think he's going to be a real factor. Same way that a Canterbury and Heron and these guys that fish there a lot could be. But I'm going Wes Logan and bucket D. Bucket E, I think you talked me into it. Honestly, your intervention that you just went through with Will Davis, I think I'm also going to go with Will Davis. I had Matt Heron written down, and I might still go with Matt Heron. But the one thing about Will Davis is obviously he's had a really good season as a rookie. Should be in bucket A, like you mentioned. We'll continue to make a big deal about that because I'm sure we'll continue to be asked. But has had a really good season. And the one thing that I've noticed with Wes when we talk to him, with Canterbury when we talk to him, and then guys that I have talked to in person, they're all, I wouldn't say terrified, like that's the right word, but I think they're all cautious because they know what Will Davis is capable of at Lay Lake, fishing up the river, fishing some of the sneaky stuff that he might know about because of, his time in the water that he spent there. So I think Will Davis and bucket E, like you said, despite being picked at 112%, I think Will Davis in bucket E is still kind of too good to be true. So I kind of hate that my lineup really doesn't have any low percentage guys because I enjoy doing that just for the sake of, trying to pick somebody a little different and try to find an outlier. Because that's, kind of the way you make up points. And like you, I have not had a great season. So I hate to go super chalk, but that's the lineup I've got confidence in. So I've got Kyle Welcher, bucket A, Bill Lowen, bucket B, Jason Christie, bucket C, Wes Logan, bucket D, and Will Davis in bucket E. And like I said, it's possible that I change that because now reading back over that, I'm
lineup.
That might be the most auto-populated lineup of all time. Like back in the day when your lineup would just get filled with the highest percentage guys, that's almost what my lineup looks like right now if we still had that feature on the fantasy site.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't necessarily think about percentages or avoid them. There's just certain times where it hits me and I'm like, man, like with Brian New, 70%, even if he's in bucket E, it's just like, that's too much. That's too much. But my percentages go 5%, 2%, 1%, 8%, and 45%. And I'll take normally I'll take a lower percentage or a higher percentage in a lower bucket than I would a higher percentage in a higher bucket, just because of the options for guys who are on a roll in the top buckets are a lot more. Let's get over to Drain the Lake, or our winning weight. Have you thought about a winning weight? We talked to Scott Canterbury earlier about it, and I have mine already, populated in there.
I haven't even given it a thought, to be honest. I haven't.
Well, I've got it at 63.12. So 15 pounds a day is 60, 16 pounds a day is 64. I think it's somewhere in that range for sure. We'll see. Now let's get over to Mercury Drain the Lake. This is the one where going into Lake Murray, I was at 60%, but your boy is back. 60% going into Lake Murray, and I'm at 90% now. I have gained so much the last 2 weeks, and if I would have been smart and put Luke Palmer on my team, I would have had both winners in South Carolina. But I got Drew Benton, I got the winner at Murray, you got Luke Palmer, you got the winner at Santee. We're all good to go there. But like I said, I pick my lineups for Drain the Lake before anybody made a cast this year. These have already been locked in. It's just me thinking about the tournament, thinking about the time of the year, what could play, who could factor, and then allocating them throughout the season. So if I have some other guys in here, who knew David Gaston and Will Davis would be the two highest Coosa River guys in Angler of the Year out of the plethora that we have. So they're on a hot streak. I've already used them and drained the lake. Will Davis paid off big time for me at Okeechobee, and David Gaston paid off big time for me at Santee Cooper, getting big fish of the tournament and finishing just outside the top 10. So we'll take that. And here's my Drain the Lake team. I'm going to give you 4, and I'm just going to go ahead and give you a couple locals sprinkled in this first batch. I'm going Scott Canterbury, Clint Davis, and Matt Herron with a Matt Airy in there. So I've got Canterbury, Clint Davis, Matt Herron, and Matt Airy. And I picked Matt Airy because I feel like we normally have maybe 2 events in May, and he always gets a top 10 in one of them. And so I feel like Matt Airy fishes really well in May. He was our first pattern of the month we did last year, and we talked to him in May. So Canterbury, Clint Davis, Matt Herron, Matt Airy are my first 4.
So my first 4, I'm laughing at my lineup again because once again, I think the theme that I'm going with here when I write my column later today is going to be all Alabama lineup. So my Drain the Lake, I'm pretty sure might end up being 8 guys from Alabama, and I think I'll probably change that. I'm not sure I'm going to keep that for good, but right now I've got 8 chalk guys in my Drain the Lake. So to start out with, I'm going Will Davis, Clint Davis, Scott Canterbury, and David Gaston are my first 4 in Drain the Lake.
I like it, and it is ballsy to go all in on that, because we know that a percentage, half of the local might not make it, and something's going to happen. Some of these guys are going to fish the same spots as each other, things like that. My bottom 4, my last 4, I went with Luke Palmer before the season started. I just feel like this is a good chance. If we're going to have a guy go back-to-back, he could really have a good chance to go back-to-back. Just with how Lay fishes, how Luke Palmer fishes. I feel like that's a solid one. Caleb Summerall, shallow grass, go up a creek, do something like that. I feel like Caleb Summerall could turn around his season. Carl Jochimson, I don't know necessarily why I put him here, but I feel like in those middle of the road tournaments, sometimes we can have a little bit of, you could take a little bit and make it into a lot. And I feel like he could be one guy that maybe does that. I'll take Carl in a warmer water tournament that's tough than a colder water tournament that's tough. I don't feel like, like at the Classic when it was tough and stuff, it's harder to see him find daily success. And then my last one, I was really excited to hear Scott Canterbury talk about. There's going to be guys running around the lake, and then there's going to be guys that stay in a specific creek or that region the whole time and don't run around a bunch and can make it and do well. And that's why I picked Larry Nixon before the season started. I thought Nixon he's had a weird start to a season. He didn't come in one day at Okeechobee and lost his weight for that day. And then, there's been some other issues, and the heartbreak, brutal 5-pounder, 6-pounder that he lost did you see that video at Santee Cooper? I mean, I did. He had a big one at the boat. He's trying to wrangle with it. It's jumping. It's going crazy. And he goes to grab it, and he couldn't get his hand in his mouth. It shakes one more time and breaks the line right there and swims away. And he's like, are you kidding me? So Larry Nixon's getting back in the groove of tournament fishing in terms of on the Elite Series. And I feel like at this point in the year, this could be a really good slow down, cover an area thoroughly tournament, and Larry could do well. So my bottom 4 are Palmer, Jochimson, Summerall, and Nixon.
There's certain tournaments too, and I think that Santee Cooper honestly is one of them that you could say this. I don't even know if we mentioned this necessarily in the podcast, but it seems like there's certain lakes that almost tailor to an old school style of fishing. And I don't just say that because Larry Nixon's been doing this for obviously a long time. I'm not just saying that, but it's a style thing. It's an old school style of fishing. And it really does seem like Lay Lake could be the place where you see some of those guys that have the veteran experience really show out. And I only say that because it's probably half the reason I don't catch them when I go to Lay Lake is because I'm not willing to slow down and effectively fish some stuff, and maybe old school techniques and things of that nature. So I actually like that pick a lot. I could see that one playing out well. To round out my all Alabama Drain the Lake roster, I've got Josh Straisner, Keith Poche, Wes Logan, and Matt Herron. Like you said, I have been very, very cautious of picking Keith Poche based on the amount of events he's fishing, and obviously whether or not he's going to be at events, things of that nature. But I think that if he's there and he's fishing, I think that it will set up well for him. Knowing the way that he fished the Open in 2020, having seen that on the water, I think that it does set up really well for his style. I think that his boat and the way he fishes could be an advantage here at Lay Lake. So I got Josh Stracner, Keith Poche, Wes Logan, and Matt Herron finishing out my roster tentatively, and I mean tentatively.
So they do. Okay, the next event for the other league is May 16th through the 21st. So it looks like Poche is available to fish with us next week. So he should be second week of May at Lay Lake. He should be there. And even if he fished all 4 days, he can still accomplish all of that. So for those wondering about Keith Poche, I say that in jest, but I really don't. He's balancing a crazy schedule, and there is not a confliction. So he can fish Lay Lake and accomplish all of his other goals that he has for himself. So you can keep him on your Drain the Lake team, Kyle, successfully. The 8-man, once again, I'll go through the whole thing. Matt Airy, Scott Canterbury, Clint Davis, Matt Herron, Larry Nixon, Caleb Summerall, Carl Jochimson, and Luke Palmer. That's my 8 guys. So, and then you had every guy from the state of Alabama except for Gerald Swindle. So
the funny thing is there's still guys from the state of Alabama on Drain the Lake that I didn't have selected. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, there definitely is.
Kennedy.
So I'll just go back.
All those other guys. Yeah.
So I've got Will Davis, Clint Davis, Scott Canterbury, David Gaston, Josh Stracner, Keith Poche, Wes Logan, and Matt Herron. And I will say this, okay? So like I said, I'm not suggesting that I'm going to keep that roster. I highly doubt that I do, to be quite honest. I think a lot of those, majority will stay. Part of what makes me think doing this for Drain the Lake from a strategy standpoint is that, okay, so we talk about this a lot. When you're setting your Drain the Lakes, schedule out, from the beginning of the year, who you want to use where, to not use them too early, not, save them for too late. You want to pick the event that they have the best chance to win, like for the double points, things of that nature. You could justify, if you want to go that route, that every single guy that I have in my lineup, this is their best chance to win all year long. So, like I said, I'm not saying I'm going to keep it, but there is a justifiable reason to do that. I'm not suggesting every one of them's going to make the cut. Who knows how it's going to play out? But one of those guys, if we were playing the odds here, if you were going to go to go online and make a sports bet about this, the odds of these guys winning the tournament are technically higher and would be higher than a lot of the field. So I think you could justify that. I think if you're a fantasy player out there that has a lot of Alabama guys in the roster and, you're like, man, we haven't had any real, recent experience here, especially this time of year. I don't really know where to go. It's not the worst idea ever to go with a lot of Alabama guys because there are a lot of them. And, even the guys that, may not be Lay Lake locals or Coosa River locals even. I think that stylistically it matches a lot of what, the Alabama pros like to do. So I'll just leave it at that. So if you want to go down that road, I don't think it's the worst idea ever. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I didn't pick Matt Herron in my 5-man lineup because if you remember, I'm jinxing him this week, and I think he's going to be PO'd going into the Sabine, where I had him in my bold predictions episode. I said he was going to win an event, and he was going to probably win it at the Sabine. And I think Brandon Polnick picked Gerald Swindle at Lay Lake. So we'll see how that fares. And I don't remember, who did you? I can't remember yours.
My bold prediction for who would win?
Yeah, like we're picking an angler.
I think I said,
look back and see.
I think I said Luke Palmer would win one. Is what I said, and I think I said he would win it at Santee Cooper. Is what I said. But I don't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure that's what I said.
I'm gonna fact check you on that one when we get done with this. But
I honestly don't remember.
The Bassmaster Elite Series heads to Lay Lake for the Whataburger Bassmaster Elite. Those tournament dates are May 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th. Super excited to have coverage every single day on Bassmaster.com, but also Bassmaster Live will hit Fox Sports 1 Saturday for 3 hours. And Kyle, on Sunday, we will have 5.5 hours of coverage on Fox Sports 1 of Lay Lake. So by God, I hope they catch him on the final day because it could be a grinder. But it's going to be great to see Whataburger Bassmaster Elite at Lay Lake. It's a place that's rooted in bass fishing history and Bassmaster history. But man, we haven't had an Elite Series event there since 2006 started the Elite Series, which would be the year 17 or 18 of the Elite. So excited to check that out. I know you are as well, rolling around with your boy Jacob as the camera boat, and I know he would love to be fishing in this event, but there's a reason for everything happens, and he'll get to aid our coverage, which is going to be huge. He'll be able to cut down that search and travel time that I often feel like we have when we're looking for guys. Where the heck are they at? Are they in this corner? Are they in this creek? So
no doubt.
Any last thoughts about Lay Lake before we let you go? Because I'm excited. I'm excited for that. I'm glad Scott Canterbury came on. We could have picked anybody. So no offense to anybody if we didn't pick you to do the interview. We just took the pressure off your back. That's all.
Yeah, it's no disrespect. I mean, that's the thing it is definitely difficult when you've got 15 guys that are technically like at least remotely locals. I mean, who to pick? But obviously I think we got a good one with Scott Canterbury. I mean, the last thing I'm just really excited. I think that it was very clear from early on in the season that this was the tournament that I was personally looking most forward to, not because the weights are going to be the best, not because guys are going to catch the most fish, but it's just like when a lake, when the Elite Series comes to your home lake, and now this is my home lake, that I'm just excited to see them take it on because, I mean, you get tangible experience from fishing out there yourself. And I'm just anxious to see these guys go at it and see how they approach the lake in a time of the year that, I think will provide a lot of opportunities. Scott Canterbury doesn't necessarily love the time of the year, it appears, but I think that it will, provide a lot of opportunities. I think the first things in the morning, they're going to catch them really good. And like he said, the guys that can figure out, a way to tap into that shad spawn and then move on and find a way to catch them later in the day will have a good chance to win. So, I think it'll be an interesting tournament, a lot of storylines, compelling storylines, and I can't wait to get started, to be honest.
I think takeoff time has adjusted as well from the Eastern time zone that we've been in, but think about this. This is the do or die portion of the season. This is a significant portion that we're about to enter. We just had 4 events. We had Okeechobee and Seminole right around the spawn. Then we go to the Classic, and then we have the immediate post spawn with some still spawning fish in there at Murray and Santee Cooper. All 4 of those events were in the 80s and 90s for weight-wise. The potential for a 6-pounder to change your day is there. That means when we get to Lay Lake and Sabine, these are going to be the 2 toughest events of the season for guys to avoid bombs. But the fact of the matter is, a 6-pounder this week or at the Sabine, a 5-pounder, those mean even more. So we love seeing a bunch of 5-pounders, but man, when Mark Menendez catches a 5-pounder and he's 96 pounds behind Luke Palmer, it doesn't mean that much. But when someone is 3 pounds back and they catch a 5-pounder at Lay Lake or the Sabine, it's going to be a game changer in terms of the leaderboard. So these next 2, it is the midway point of the season, but before we go north for the final 3 smallmouth events of the season, basically at St. Clair, Champlain, and St. Lawrence, these are the 2 X Factor tournaments. You cannot make the Bassmaster Classic if you haven't caught them excellently prior, and you need to catch them this week. These are the 2 events that you have to catch them at and survive them. So we'll see who survives and advances to the Northern Swing with some points in their pocket. But Kyle, for Ronnie Moore, that's Kyle, Jessie, episode 126 of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast presented by Black Rifle Coffee Company. Lay Lake, 5th stop of the Elite Series season, about to kick off this week. Those are all our fantasy picks. Scott Canterbury told you some key info. We look forward to getting that event started. Kyle, I'll see you in the next one, man.